It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the shocking videos that have all emerged in the past 24 hours that lay bare the UK's knife crime epidemic. A teenager has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after this fight on a train in South London yesterday. 2 teens have been sentenced after a brawl that involved machetes in Nottingham. And a man has been jailed for stabbing a Deliveroo rider after trying to steal his bike. Tonight, we'll discuss what is going on the UK streets and, importantly, how we tackle it. Also coming up, the boss of Britain's biggest water company says customer bills will have to go up by 40%. We'll have the latest on Thames Water's future after shareholders blame the regulator for their decision to pull £500 million of planned investment. We'll be live in southeast London, where a 50-hour siege involving a man and a gas canister has finally come to an end. And there's an official warning for England and Scotland fans ahead of the Euros about the strength of German beer. Well, that's come. Much more on the UK Tonight. We start tonight with the UK's knife crime epidemic, laid bare by a shocking video captured on a train in London yesterday. In the clip, a man can be seen holding a large knife while involved in a fight with another man, as passengers scream for him to stop and frantically call the police. Well, a 19-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The 20-year-old victim is currently in a critical but stable condition in hospital. We are about to show you that video, and we should warn you that you may find it distressing.
As soon as possible. And the ambulance, and the ambulance.
This man with a big knife.
And the ambulance.
I'm on the train. So Beckenham jump on this.
Also released yesterday, this video from Enfield in North London, which shows a teenager armed with a knife attacking a Deliveroo rider in broad daylight to try and steal his bike. This happened in July last year. The attacker, 19-year-old Lewis Livingston, was jailed for 6.5 years earlier this month. And 2 teenagers were sentenced yesterday over this incident in Nottingham. You may remember this video. It went viral. It happened in January, again, in the middle of the day. 2 groups of youths chasing each other through Nottingham city centre. This video taken from outside the city's contemporary art gallery. 2 young men have been given sentences of 16 months and 18 months over the incident. Well, on top of all of that, a man was arrested on suspicion of 2 counts of attempted murder in South London last night. This is after one man was stabbed on the platform at Kennington Tube Station and another man was injured as he stepped in to try and stop that attack. So you could be forgiven for asking, what on earth is going on right now in the UK? Well, to discuss it, I'm joined in the studio tonight by John Yates. John is Executive Director of the Youth Endowment Fund, and alongside him, youth worker Lucy Martindale, who has lost a number of friends and family members to knife crime. Thank you both for coming in to join me tonight. I think it was really important to show people those videos just to give people a snapshot of what is happening. Lucy, I'll come to you first. You should be shocked by those videos. What's happening there is shocking. But just how commonplace is what we just witnessed?
I believe it's all too common these days. I feel like society has become very desensitised to not just knife violence, but seeing this type of violence in public, you know, people on the way home, going to work. It is shocking, but I have seen it all before, sadly.
Yeah. John, what was your reaction, particularly to that video yesterday? Because I think what really shocked people about it was broad daylight. It was a commuter train in a London suburb. There were men and women on there, and you could see a lot of people weren't quite sure what was going on. Someone was filming it, you could hear someone calling the police. And all of us can put ourselves in the shoes of those passengers. We've all commuted on a train at that time of day. That is something you don't expect to see.
It is, and it's tragic, and it's shocking. I think shocking is the right word. I think most people will look at that and they'll say, I could have been on that train. Maybe that could have happened to me. Maybe that could have happened to someone I love. And I think these moments should shock us. I think that we need to be just aware these are rare incidents, and so you're as likely to be stabbed and lose your life as you are to win £1 million on the lottery if you played it for about a month. And so I don't for a moment want to downplay what's going on, but I don't think panic is the answer. I think the answer is to recognise, for many of us, particularly some of our children, this is far too common. We found that when we did a survey very recently at the Youth Endowment Fund, half of all the teenage children in the UK have changed their behaviour in some way because they're afraid of incidents like that. Either that's skipping school, or that's changing when they go out, staying at home more, or it's that they can't sleep. So I think we're right to say, look, let's bottle this moment, to say, let's do something about it. But I don't think panic is the right response. I think we need to actually have a proper plan and put it into place.
Yeah, you're right to put it into perspective. Lucy, you speak to young people. You've had many incidents of knife crime and fatalities within your own family and friendship circles, so you know this subject, sadly, all too well. When you speak to young people about not just knife crime, but carrying knives, what do they say to you? Because the sense seems to be at the moment, as John alluded to there, that young children are carrying knives for protection, almost out of fear that something like that could happen to them, because there is this understanding that that is now a culture that exists among the youth community in the UK.
I would say most young people that I speak to, that is the main reason for them carrying a knife, is out of fear. But we also know, sadly, that if you do carry a knife and some altercation happens, you're more than likely to be stabbed with your own knife. But trying to tell young people not to carry a knife when they're terrified to leave their house, sadly, just doesn't work, because the fear is very real for many young people. I mean, even my own children, I have 2 teenagers, and I fear for them every single day they leave the house. I'm anxious until they get home. And it's just really sad that so many parents can relate to that feeling.
John, with the work you do and the research you do, what is the evidence about what works in this instance? Because we talk about knife crime a lot, and I know parents will talk to their children if they feel that they might be mixing in a social circle where that might happen. You know, if they're going to senior school in an inner city area. I mean, I say inner city, it's happening in London suburbs as well. It's happening in the West Midlands. This is UK-wide. What is the evidence to show what works? What's effective when trying to get through to young people?
Yeah, that's right. The first thing I'd say is we've got to remember we have some brilliant young people in this country. The vast majority of young people never carry a knife.
And they don't want to either, even those that do.
And don't want to. We owe it, though, to all our children to be safe, to grow up in a country that's safe. So what works? First thing is we need to focus on what I call the same children, because we're often to be worried about the same children. What do I mean, same? Children who are severely absent from school, children who've been arrested. Lucy does brilliant work with children who are arrested, children who have gone missing, and children who have been permanently excluded. Those children are particularly vulnerable to getting pulled into conflict, violence, and being afraid in this way. So we need to focus our attention on those children, and we don't consistently do that. Second, final thing, what do we do with those children? I have this sort of radical idea that we shouldn't care so much about being soft on crime or being tough on crime. We should be smart on crime. Why don't we do the things that we know work? And we do actually know quite a lot about what works. What is it that could make this thing never happen again? It's focusing on those children and giving them one of 3 things. Mentoring, long-term supportive mentoring, sort of thing Lucy does, can make a real difference. Therapy can make... A lot of these children have become hyper-vigilant and concerned, and therapy can... Some people say, it's very soft. I don't care, it works. Finally, policing matters. We do need to have policing who know their neighbourhood, who know their community, regularly in the right places. The police have a name for it, they call it hotspots policing. We need to see compassionate, informed, well-trained police doing hotspot policing. And we don't persistently do these things.
Lucy, does that chime in with your experience? Because I know you speak to so many young people. What are those conversations like with them? What do they want? Can they see a way out once they get into this kind of pattern?
A lot of the time, I don't think young people can see a way out when they feel there's no support, which in a lot of cases there isn't very much support, to be honest. And that's just...
And when you say support, do you mean mentor, support from school?
From school,
home life.
Home life, so many different areas. We were speaking earlier, John, saying about if young people were given the support that they needed, like mentoring, better housing, their GP, a lot of young people go to their GP and discuss their mental health, and nothing's ever done. And there's so many lost opportunities to help these young people. And yet again, it always goes back to lack of funding from central government.
Yeah, John, it does always come back to funding, doesn't it? Because, you know, we've been talking about knife crime on the UK Tonight since the show started, and we talk about it a lot, and it comes back to, you know, youth centres, mentors, places to go within the community. And I know you've done research that shows sport really helps people, and that's, you know, we've known that for years, but it does come down to money and resource, doesn't it? And when there isn't that available, what can you do?
Yeah, of course, you can't expect people who are highly skilled and able to mentor a young person who's had a very difficult life and potentially making some very serious, dangerous choices to do it for free. That would be insane. So, of course, people have to be paid. And so I'm not going to sort of dodge that. Yes, if we're serious about solving this problem, we do need to put some money in. But it's not just about the money. Let me just give you one example. When a child is arrested for carrying a knife, those are the children who should be getting absolutely brilliant mentoring support. If we're not going to take them to court, if we're not going to charge them, and most of the time we don't, we need to intervene. But a lot of those children get passed over and don't get supported. Now, who in government is responsible for fixing that problem? Because the arrest, a very slightly technical point, the arrest sits with one cabinet minister, but the support otherwise sits with a different one. And we see these little problems that actually, if you want something fixed in your house, if one work person says it's the other person's job, it never gets done. We actually need to focus on the places these children get support when they're arrested, when they're excluded from school, when they go missing, when they're absent from school, and make sure someone is actually accountable for supporting those children. Otherwise, we're going to have more incidents like we've seen over the last few days.
Sorry, may I just add that these young people, I believe, are lost and trapped in a system that just isn't working. For as long as that we're not given the support, or these young people, knife crime will continue to rise.
Oh, well, look, you both do incredible work in this area. Thank you so much for your insight. It is something we will continue to talk about here on the UK Tonight, and highlight the need for change and measures to be put in place, for something to be done, for something meaningful to be done. Lucy Martindale and John Yates from the Youth Endowment Fund, thank you so much for your time tonight here.
Thank you.
On UK Tonight. Thank you. Now, in other news today, the boss of Thames Water, the UK's biggest water company, says customer bills are going to have to go up by 40% to pay for improvements to its network. The business, which serves nearly a quarter of the UK population, is struggling with debts of more than £15 billion, and its investors have decided not to go through with a £500 million cash injection expected by the end of this month, blaming the UK's water regulator. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso explains.
For months, Thames Water has faced a sea of troubles.
Thames Water has apologised for these ongoing issues.
A poor record on leaks and on sewage contamination.
The company was fined more than £32 million.
We understand that our performance has not been good enough.
Now Britain's biggest water company could become the largest failure of privatisation. A standoff between the company and regulator Ofwat has seen shareholders pull the plug on a multi-billion-pound investment, and the boss scrambling to reassure customers it can stay afloat.
We want to get to a business case that is in the best interests of customers. It is affordable for them, but it is also financeable for Thames Water and investable for our shareholders.
Thames's problem is it's drowning in debt that it's struggling to afford. More than £15 billion has been piled onto the regulated company since privatisation, some of it funding investment in infrastructure, while bills actually remained relatively low. But £7 billion has been paid out in dividends to shareholders, almost £3 billion of that to Australian bank Macquarie in the 2010s. Now, the current owners, including British and Canadian pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, haven't taken an external dividend since they took control in 2017, but they do want a return on their investment, at some point, and that now depends on the outcome of negotiations with the regulator Ofwat. Thames says it needs to spend £20 billion upgrading pipes and sewers, and it wants even more money from the shareholders to pay for it. They had agreed to provide £3.75 billion, starting with £500 million this month, but only if Thames agreed concessions with Ofwat, including putting up bills by 40% and lower fines for sewage spills. So far, Ofwat has refused, leaving the company, in its own words, uninvestable. Now, Thames says it's got enough money to trade until next May, but if it can't agree a deal that's attractive to investors, it will fall into special administration, effectively nationalisation. Privately, ministers are preparing for this, but publicly, they're blaming the company.
Well, I think the leadership of Thames Water has been a disgrace. I think for years now, we've seen the customers of Thames Water taken advantage of. The answer is not to hit the consumers. The answer is for the management team to look to their own approach and ask themselves why they're in this difficult situation. And of course, the answer is because of serial mismanagement for which they must carry the can.
In Tooting, South London, residents would like the hole in the road fixed before they're asked to repair the finances.
Quite upset and annoyed, actually, yeah, because they don't seem to be providing a very good service at all at the moment.
For the amount that they're charging at the moment, I don't think that they should be putting it up, because it's what we're already paying for is supposed to be for the sewage and for cleaning and making sure that everything is okay.
Their shareholders are receiving dividends of ludicrous amounts of money. I don't really see what extra service we're getting for this 40% rise.
The next few months will determine whether Thames and the privatised water model is beyond repair. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
We're joining us now, John Bosco Nwogbo, who is the lead campaigner at We Own It. And they have written an open letter to the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak calling for water companies to be nationalised. John Bosco, good to see you here on the UK Tonight. And Paul Kelso, they're explaining the mess Thames Water is in. The big question is that who's going to clear it up?
Well, unfortunately, privatisation has gotten us in this incredible mess. And obviously, I think most people would now agree that it's at an end. No other country in the world does water the way England does water. I think we would like to be exceptional for something good, but this is something bad that we're exceptional for. Not even Scotland or Wales does water this way, allowing multinational private equity companies representing Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Canada, and other countries owning such a vital infrastructure. And who's going to pay for it? We do not want a situation where ratepayers or bill payers are being asked to pay for more profits for Thames Water. We are saying that the government should take the whole system back into public ownership, reinvest whatever profits, the profits that have been sucked out in the form of dividends over the last 30 years, about £7 billion, should be reinvested back into the system so it works for people and not for profit. All of those people that were shown in that package, I am sure they would be in support of public ownership, because our polling shows that 7 out of 10 people in Britain support public ownership of water.
Yeah, people support public ownership until perhaps they're presented with the bill for it, because, you know, some estimates say it could, be 90 million or whatever to take over Thames Water. And when you think of all the other areas that people want investment, the NHS, social care, the train network, the truth is we can't pay for it all. And I just wonder how high up, the water infrastructure would be, given that most people don't notice a problem. They have very clean drinking water. The bills so far are manageable compared to, say, the energy sector.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question, but I would like to say that...
No, I was just going to say, can the UK afford to nationalise the water infrastructure? Because there's so many other areas crying out for investment. NHS, social care, trains, and, the energy sector as well, calls all the time to nationalise the energy sector. How could we afford to nationalise the UK water infrastructure?
Something that is really important to say is that Scotland have their water in public ownership. And over the last 30 years, they've invested on average £72 per household in Scotland every single year, more than we have in England.
That doesn't mean England could afford to do it.
Well, we can afford to do it because we can afford to reinvest profits into the system. We were promised when water was taken...
But Thames Water is 18 million or so in debt. So, you know, you'd have to buy it at market value, pay off all those debts, pay the shareholders as well. Where's all this money coming from?
So what we've said in the letter today is that the government should establish a shadow water board in the area covered by Thames Water. And that water board will, in effect, serve as kind of safety net for a time when Thames Water goes bust. The government, when it goes bust, does not then have to pay exorbitant fees for Thames Water because it's, in effect, a worthless company when it goes bust. And what we are saying to them is when you take it into special administration, do not then repair it and send it back into the private sector like they did with Bulb in 2022. We're saying repair it and keep it in public ownership like they did with RailTrack and Network Rail in 2002. There is a very significant body of evidence that this has been done in the past in Britain, and it's been done really successfully as well.
OK, John Bosco and Rogbo, lead campaigner at We Own It, who have written that letter to the Prime Minister calling to nationalise Thames Water permanently. Thank you for your time tonight. Well, that story sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers, our extended press preview and news review coming up from 10:30 tonight, with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us, the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. A man has been arrested after a siege in south-east London. Police officers spent more than 50 hours negotiating with a man who had been alone inside a property in Catford with a gas canister, with fears that he would harm himself or others. Well, Sky's Emma Birchley has been following the story for us and is live in Catford for us tonight. 50-hour siege, Emma. What details do we have?
Well, you can imagine how concerning it would be to get a knock on the door on Monday night, it was around 7 o'clock, to be told that there was a gas leak and that you've got to leave straight away and head to the other side of the police cordon, having no idea that it actually was going to be more than 50 hours until you'd be able to return to your home. What was happening was that in the house with the light on, a man had a gas canister and there were real concerns that he may hurt himself or others, and the emergency service response was vast. There were crisis negotiators brought in, firearms officers, and it wasn't until the early hours of today that it was finally resolved, and a 26-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of making threats to cause criminal damage with intent to endanger life. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to someone who lives a few doors away. She was one of the many people who had to leave their homes and had to stay away for so long, Nina Desai. She talked about the huge disruption it caused for her and her family.
It was so frightening that you're only like 5 doors away from someone who's got a gas cylinder, who's barricaded himself in the house. Neither me nor my partner could go to work because we couldn't come back and get any stuff. I actually work most of the time from home. All my laptop and my stuff is at home, so I couldn't work. My son couldn't go to college for 3 days because he didn't have any of his books. We had nothing but the clothes we were standing in.
Well, Nina went and stayed with her mum on the first night with her family and then checked into a hotel. Rest centres were set up nearby. The man who was arrested was bitten by a police dog during that process and has had to be treated in hospital. He will then obviously face questioning. The senior detective in charge of this investigation has thanked everyone in the community for the enormous amount of disruption that they've had to face in what he described as an extremely sensitive and complex matter.
Emma Birchley, thank you. Still to come on the UK Tonight, we'll get the latest revelations on the post office scandal from our business correspondent Adele Robinson. Also coming up, the Queen stands in for the King at the Maundy Thursday service today. And Snowway. Residents in Devon and some parts of Wales wake up to an icy blast ahead of Easter weekend.
got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent and I'm based here in Beijing.
We help you understand the world with us. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello, welcome back. Sky News has seen evidence that more than £1 million of unexplained transactions were transferred into a post office account at the height of the Horizon scandal, when sub-postmasters were using their own money to keep their accounts correct. We've also heard recordings of conversations between auditors and civil servants, which suggests those investigating the accounting problems at the post office were barred from discussing their findings with MPs. Our business correspondent Adele Robinson reports.
Where did this money come from? It didn't come out of thin air.
More than £1 million of unexplained transactions going into post office profit at the height of the Horizon scandal.
These were large amounts being taken to the credit of the profit and loss account without proper investigation.
Leaked documents given to Sky News show unaccounted for money between 2007 and 2010, raising questions: did some of this come from sub-postmasters' pockets, wrongly forced to pay shortfalls in their branches?
We just don't know because of the lack of granularity. But Post Office was not printing money; it was accumulating funds in its suspense account. Those funds belonged to somebody, either to third-party clients or to sub-postmasters. And part of the work that Ron Warmington and I were doing in 2015 was drilling into that. We were starting to make progress, but that was when we were sacked.
Ian Henderson's from Second Sight, the independent forensic accountants brought in to investigate the scandal a decade ago.
I can see from this letter here, which is dated 13th of February, and it's from Alistair Cameron, Chief Financial Officer for Post Office.
In this letter, Post Office admits transactions are not always clear and cannot be traced.
At best, this is the Post Office mismanaging its finances. Usually, well-run organisations like banks clear their suspense accounts over a few days, not months or years. But at worst, this may be money from sub-postmasters who personally made up shortfalls, ending up in Post Office profits.
It's my money. They deduct it from my salary. I mean, we're talking about £2 or £20,000.
Meanwhile, Seema Misra, wrongly convicted by Post Office and jailed whilst pregnant, still hasn't had her money back.
They took the money and they used that money, which wasn't. It's my money. If I put that in the saving account or something, I would have got the interest back on it. It's like terrible. They're playing not just people's money, people's emotions.
Second Sight say they were sacked by Post Office after asking questions about accounts. Now, new tapes of secret recordings given to Sky News may mark where the relationship began to go wrong.
Either, we have unfettered discretion and authorisation to talk to MPs, or we haven't. At the moment, the way the document is drafted, we are prevented from doing that. That's the issue.
Yes.
In a meeting in 2014, Second Sight colleagues Ron Warmington and Ian Henderson are speaking with a lawyer and a senior figure brought in by Post Office, concerned they're being blocked from talking to MPs.
My point is we should not be gagging either the applicant or Second Sight in being able to respond, fully and frankly to MPs who, frankly, sort of set this whole process in motion.
The Post Office representative replies saying they're not trying to gag anybody.
If later it emerges that a document has effectively gagged Second Sight in its dealings with the MPs, and they later find out about it, it's not going to be Second Sight they're particularly annoyed with, it's going to be Post Office.
The Post Office representative says they think that's something the Post Office will have to deal with if it arises. Post Office, meanwhile, say the public inquiry with the power to question under oath is the best forum to examine the issues. But at the same time these tapes were recorded, sub-postmasters were still being wrongly prosecuted. Another revelation and more undoubtedly to come. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
The Queen was inundated with messages for the King and the Princess of Wales today. She greeted well-wishers at the Maundy service in Worcester. The King didn't attend as he undergoes treatment for cancer, but he sent an audio message which was played during the service. Sky's Katie Spencer was there.
This is the gospel of Christ.
In his absence, they listened.
Jesus said to him,
Unexpected, a Maundy message from a king who couldn't be here.
"It is for me a great sadness that I cannot be with you all today. The Maundy service has a very special place in my heart."
Recorded in mid-March at Buckingham Palace, one of just a few times we've heard from the monarch since he announced his cancer diagnosis.
It has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family.
Less than a week after Catherine's video message, an audio one of the King's own.
We need and benefit greatly from those who extend the hand of friendship to us, especially in a time of need.
Celebrating kindness has always been at the heart of Maundy Thursday, dating back to the reign of King John. Last year they did this together. This year she was alone.
Had he been here, he would have simply distributed the money and we wouldn't have heard from him, but he was able to give an inspirational message and offer congratulations to the recipients.
This the handing out of coins to those who volunteered in their communities. 75 men, 75 women. One for every year of the King's life.
A unique time for the royals. The family's openness about cancer, sharing their battles with an awful disease that affects us all, has, if anything, brought a much deeper connection with the public at events like these, one which in the past they've struggled to make.
Pam Bishop, a recipient who travelled down from Liverpool to receive her 2 purses.
I'm in the middle of chemotherapy treatment myself, so I actually said to the Queen, give my best wishes, I understand what it's like. And she said, you're looking very well.
Back at Buckingham Palace, pictures of how the King is still working, but within more controllable settings. Meetings with ambassadors from the Republic of Burundi and Moldova. Health permitting, the next time we see him should be in person. Like many other families facing cancer, carrying on matters. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
So to come on the UK tonight, we have a special report for you on the environmental impact of the UK's data hubs. And the Foreign Office warning for England and Scotland fans heading to the Euros this summer about the strength of German beer. Welcome back to the UK Tonight. Breaking news from South Africa. 45 people have been killed in a bus crash in Limpopo. An 8-year-old girl is believed to be the only survivor. Let's get more now. Our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Baga joins us now from Johannesburg. At this stage, what details do we have?
So what we know, Sarah-Jane, is that this bus was turning on a bridge and fell nearly 50 metres to a very rocky surface, mountainside surface that's quite typical in the Limpopo area up in the north. This area does share a border with Botswana, and the bus does have a Botswanan registration number. So all reports are indicating that they were coming from Botswana to Moraya in Limpopo, where there is the Zion Christian Church, one of the biggest black churches here in South Africa, to celebrate Easter. These kind of accidents aren't uncommon during Easter weekend. Last year, 252 people were killed over the 4-day Easter weekend here. It's quite typical, but what I think is so shocking about this is the fact that everyone died but this 8-year-old girl, as you said. She's currently being treated at a nearby hospital for her injuries. It is said that she's severely injured, but I think what will be quite shocking is to come to the realization or be told by her medical care team or whoever is with her that everyone she was traveling with died, including presumably family members or guardians who may be going with her to spend Easter in Moraya. So it's really quite shocking. The Easter weekend is just starting. A lot of people here are celebrating, and then this devastating news coming in from the north. The rescue mission went on till the late hours of this evening. Some of the bodies are unrecognizable, buried under debris on the mountainside, burnt. So it's very, very grim.
Yusra, thank you. Yusra El-Baga in Johannesburg with the details on that. We'll keep across the situation here on Sky News throughout the evening. Now, a Sky News investigation has found that our growing appetite for data and AI is putting water and energy supplies at risk. With global electricity demand forecast to double by 2026, billions of litres of water will be needed to use to cool servers around the world. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark gained exclusive access to data centres in Slough, the second largest data hub on the planet.
Believe it or not, Slough is Europe's largest data hub, the second largest in the world. These anonymous buildings are data centres, handling the vast majority of the world's internet traffic.
So why are we restricted in what we can see and can't see here?
Yeah, I mean, customer security is our top priority.
It's rare for us to be inside one. Data centres are now critical infrastructure and ruthlessly competitive. The condition of access here is that we don't film any customers' servers.
You know, what you'll notice here is lots of cables, and what that means is this is where the internet all connects.
Data demand is booming, and with big tech firms racing to train insanely data-hungry AI models, so are their energy needs.
Not only do they need a lot of power to run, they also need a lot of power to cool. They generate a lot of excess heat, and right now cold air is being pumped through these vents in the floor of this data centre to carry that heat away. And for an industry that's forecast to grow 34% a year for the next 5 years at least, that's a challenge because all of that power has to come from somewhere.
The International Energy Agency forecasts energy demand from data increasing in all regions of the world, doubling by 2026. In Ireland, it expects data centres to consume nearly a third of all the country's electricity within 2 years. There are 82 data centres in Europe's low-tax tech hub, the vast majority clustered around Dublin. In Ireland, there have been concerns about blackouts, and in arid parts of the world, because of all that cooling, protests over data's water demand coming before thirsty people.
There isn't a great deal of transparency from the big tech companies themselves around energy consumption or water use. So most of these are estimates. One estimate for every typical user interaction with ChatGPT, the data server would use the equivalent of 500 milliliter bottle of water. And that's a single user interaction.
Regulators in Europe and the US are demanding more transparency and efficiency. Here, next to an Amazon data centre in Dublin, is a district heating scheme. that uses waste heat from the data centre to warm nearby homes and businesses. More schemes like this would help, but given the demand for resources, especially of AI, big tech faces some big questions about what society gets in return for their race for data supremacy. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Now, here's a story that caught the eye of many football fans today. The Foreign Office issuing a warning to England and Scotland fans who are heading to this summer's Euros about the strength of German beer. The guidance has been added to the official government advice for travel to Germany this summer, warning fans that the beer can be stronger than in the UK and telling them to know their limits and drink responsibly. Well, for reaction to this, Paul Goodwin, co-founder of the Scottish Football Supporters Association, joins me now. Paul, the beer is too strong for you. What precautions will you be taking in Germany this summer?
I think this is one of those stories that we thought was going to arrive in the 1st of April. The Tartan Army and the Scotland fans, we've travelled the world and sampled the local delights of the beers and the cuisine all over the world, and we've never really had a problem with it. So it's much ado about nothing, I think.
Well, they have got a point, because apparently in the UK, the typical strength of a beer is about 4.4%. In Germany, it's 5.4%. How are you training for this?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a myth, really. The truth of the matter is that over the years, we've had so many imported beers coming into the UK. Most of the people have tried it. They know the German beers. We've all travelled all over the world, not just to Germany, but if you think Scotland have recently been in the Czech Republic, they've been in Belgium, two of the famous homes of beers all over the world, and never really had a major problem with it. So I really do think it's a couple of days too early, this story. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. What are your plans for this summer? Because the opening game for Scotland is against the host Germany in Munich. Are you going?
Listen, I only found out today that I've got a chance of a ticket, despite the fact people think because you're involved in running the Fans Association, you're bound to have so many contacts. But only found out today there's a chance. It is just a chance that I might get a ticket for the Scotland-Germany game. So fingers crossed. And then, obviously, lots of other bridges to cross. The incredible cost of flights and accommodation. But you never know. I might make it. Fingers crossed.
Well, I've got my fingers crossed for you. And you're sitting in a camper van at the moment. Is that how you're going to get there if that flight's too expensive, if you get that call up last minute?
Well, that's to be negotiated with the boss, who might be wanting the camper van while I'm in Germany. But we have
Are you talking about your wife here or somebody you work for? Just to be clear.
No, that's my wife.
Yeah, I thought as much. Just had to check, though.
No, we have about 180 camper vans that we know of that are all going. So I might well be able to join them if I play my cards right.
Well, maybe you can wangle a ticket for the boss. Does she like her football?
She does like her football. But no, I'm not so sure about an extra ticket.
Yeah, how good's that contact, right? It's a bit cheeky asking for two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, listen, Paul, it's been great to talk to you. It's a good excuse to start training, isn't it, if this beer's too strong?
Well, I've got one in the fridge here just now, the camper van. Yeah, so I'm just about to crank one open. It's the start of Easter weekend. So training, as you suggested, has got to start early.
I was just checking the time. It's 9:15. Go on. Don't have one, have two. On us. Paul, good to talk to you. I'm sure we will talk again ahead of the Euros. Good luck with that ticket.
Take care.
Thank you. Paul Goodwin there from the Scottish Football Supporters Association. Beer's too strong. Coming up on the UK Tonight, a snowy start to the Easter weekend for people in Devon and Wales. We'll have the latest forecast for you. Plus, Newcastle's Sandro Tonali faces a new charge for breaching betting rules. The full story on the way.
And coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim, the very latest on a bus crash in South Africa that's killed 45 people but left one sole survivor, an 8-year-old child. Plus, the crypto king who defrauded people out of billions of dollars is sentenced to 25 years in prison. All that and more coming up at 9 p.m.
require mountaineering skills. Beaks come in useful as ice picks. And tobogganing is a quick way down.
Well, I had the pleasure of curating them for this album that Dolby commissioned, 7 Sonic Wonders. And so I wanted to include sounds from across the planet, from a glacier in Iceland right down to the sounds of a frog chorus in the tropical parts of Panama, but also sounds closer to home, starlings, a great murmuration of birds, the Ring Angels track. So it was difficult to choose 7 tracks, but I wanted to give a sort of wide geographical range, and also sounds that I just found astonishing, as well as sounds that we need to consider as regards protecting the habitats in which they happen.
That's amazing. Chris, tell us more about the whale sounds.
Well, I think that they're humpback whales, and they're singing on their migration route down the North Atlantic to the Silver Bank. And what I found fascinating about that is that not only the songs of the whales themselves, but the acoustic of their environment. I heard for the first time this remarkable cathedral-like space around the whales, and that's something I wanted to include. And that's the thing that Dolby Atmos does. It spatializes the sound, so I can take the listener to where my microphones, or hydrophones were in this case, when I made the recordings. Not just conventional microphones like the ones that we're using now, but also for the whales, underwater microphones, which are called hydrophones. And sometimes I'm really interested in putting, like the microphones I'm wearing now, and you've got on, these tiny personal microphones. And I often think there are much more interesting places to put those microphones other than on people sometimes, because it allows you to get them into these magical spaces and tune into the natural world in a way that we rarely get the opportunity of hearing.
Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. A snowy start to the Easter weekend for some of you. We'll have the latest in just a moment. Snow at Easter, who'd have thought it, eh? But first, Chris is here with the sport, and we're going to talk about Newcastle's Sandro Tonali. He's facing fresh charges for breaching betting rules. You may remember he's already serving a suspension for other betting-related charges. But, Chris, this is different. How?
Well, this is different because those charges related to bets placed when he was playing in Italy for AC Milan, and they were charges brought by the Italian FA. This is charges brought by the English FA, based on charges placed while he was a Newcastle player this season between August and October. There's 50 alleged breaches of the FA betting rules. For each of them, you can say that's 1 bet per breach. It is interesting that when he became aware that he was under investigation in Italy, that is pretty much when the betting ended here. So I think the English FA, the eyes on the authorities will now be on how do you handle someone who's 23 years old. In mitigation, in defence for the initial betting breaches in Italy, it was put forward that he has a gambling addiction. So it would seem almost unjust if they said, right, hammer this person with another breach. Part of his punishment as well is that he has 8 months therapy for his gambling addiction. So we'll now see what happens with regard to this, but it is still 50 breaches, alleged breaches of the FA's betting rules.
Chris, we seem to be hearing about this more and more, maybe because the authorities are getting a handle on it and finding those who are breaking the betting rules. But is this a big problem in football, amongst young footballers in particular?
Well, Paul Merson has his own storied history with gambling. He is very open about his history with gambling, a gambling addict, and he says that it's rife within the game. And I was just having a quick glance at the photo we've got there to see if there's any betting advertisements on Sandro Tonali's shirt. There isn't, but on most of the shirts in the Premier League, there is. There's
and in stadiums as well, it's everywhere.
On the television, when we go to advert breaks, in the stadiums, on the radio. Temptation is there for everybody, not just the players, the spectators, the listeners on the radio as well. And Paul Merson would say, look, this is something that really needs to be thought about, and addiction is not something that you can just completely switch off. So the temptation is there. Paul Merson is more of an expert than me. I think we have to wait and see what will happen with Sandro Tonali. So that is Tonali. Plenty more to come in tonight's sport.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Tell me about this business venture then, the Kings League. Why really did you want to create that in the first place?
Well, I think that there was a need for all this generation that is coming, all these young guys that they want something that is short but very exciting, and that they cannot lose focus, because what's happening with traditional football is that 90 minutes might be a little bit long for these new generations. Obviously not the final of the Champions League or the semi-finals of the Champions League or the last games of the leagues, but there are too many games, too many football. People sometimes get lost on how many competitions, and we wanted to create a product that was similar to football, that it's complementary, but because there is a lot of people that likes football and likes Kings League, but with crazy rules and a lot of things happening in the ecosystem of Kings League that it's very different from the traditional football as we understand. The idea now is to launch the World Cup, the Kings World Cup, that will start the 26th of May until the 8th of June in Mexico. And the idea is to put together the best teams of Spain, the best teams of the Americas League, plus some wildcards that we will give to strategic streamers or creators of content in each territory that will allow us to arrive globally to everyone. No? This is why we launched the World Cup, because we want to be global. I think that all the Spanish market, they know what is Kings League and they follow it, but it's true that now we want to make this expansion, and I think that the World Cup, it's key for us.
In terms of the Kings League, am I right in saying that presidents can make two signings a window or a week? We at Sky Sports love a transfer. Do you have an exclusive for me in terms of a player who's coming through, maybe a British player?
No, I cannot tell you anything, and it's true that the presidents, which are creators of content in Kings League, they love to make...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And now we'd like to leave you with something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight to close out the show. And for some parts of the country, it's been a rather wintry start to the Easter weekend. We've got some pictures for you from Devon, where motorists have been urged to drive with extreme care. This is after snow fell overnight. There are also warnings that it could cause further delays on the roads for those heading on Easter getaways. Temperatures dropped to as low as 1.5 degrees. There is as much as 2 inches of snow settling in some parts of the county. The Met Office has warned of potentially more snowfall and sleet overnight, and they've also issued a yellow weather warning for wind for parts of Somerset and Dorset. It's going to make that Easter egg hunt rather difficult. Right, let's have a look at the weather for the rest of us.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Milder for Easter weekend, but there will be some heavy showers, most widespread tomorrow. Before then, England, Wales and eastern parts of Northern Ireland will see plenty of evening showers, some heavy, prolonged and thundery. Most other places looking dry, but rain and hill snow will affect northern Scotland. The windy south will see gales near Channel Coast. There are going to be showers for many tonight and more general rain in the far north. But central parts will mostly dry up later. It's going to turn chilly there under clear skies with frost and fog possible in Northern Ireland. The gales will slowly ease. Blustery showers will develop widely tomorrow morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That's all from the UK Tonight. You can catch up on the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen. Next up is The World with Yalda Hakim.